A magnitude 8 earthquake has shaken the area around Yellowstone National Park. Now a new study claims that the so-called super volcano could erupt by 2025. How likely is it that this will happen? Will the eruption be dangerous for the whole world? Let's take a look at what happened recently, what experts are saying, and why more and more scientists are sounding the alarm about Yellowstone. You definitely want to watch this video until the end if you don't want to miss the most important news. So let's get started. Yellowstone National Park is home to one of the largest and most active geothermal areas on Earth. Its most famous landmark is the Yellowstone caldera, also known as the Yellowstone Super Volcano. The caldera was formed about 630,000 years ago during a massive volcanic eruption. It is estimated to have been the largest eruption in the history of our planet. The magma chamber beneath Yellowstone extends over an area of 43,000 square kilometers. That's about half the size of New York City. Over the past 15 million years, Yellowstone has had 3 super eruptions with an incredible force of over 1,000 cubic kilometers of material each. In comparison, the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington ejected about 1.2 cubic kilometers of ash and pumice. The last eruption of the Yellowstone Super Volcano happened 70,000 years ago. Since then, its activity has been declining. However, according to some researchers, we may witness a repetition of the historical events in the near future. On Monday, January 4, 2022, just before 10 a.m. local time, a magnitude 8 earthquake struck southwest of the city of West Yellowstone in Montana, which is located near the northern border of Yellowstone National Park. According to the United States Geological Survey, the epicenter was 45 kilometers southeast of the town of West Yellowstone and 85 kilometers from Old Faithful. The quake occurred at a depth of 12 kilometers. There were no immediate reports of damage or injuries. According to the USGS, a magnitude 8 earthquake is relatively rare but not unheard of in the region. In fact, earthquakes with a magnitude of 7.2 or higher occur on average every 5 to 10 years in the western United States. Fortunately, the tremors were not strong enough to cause significant destruction, but the incident once again raised concern about the possibility of an eruption of the Yellowstone Super Volcano. As you may have heard, many scientists believe that it is overdue for an eruption and could blow up at any moment. But how true is this? Will the earthquake have triggered a volcanic eruption, and how dangerous would such an event actually be? Let's go back to the beginning to find out why the Yellowstone Super Volcano could erupt soon. Yellowstone is considered an active volcano. However, there is no scientific basis for predicting when or even if the next eruption will occur. Volcanic eruptions are often preceded by increased seismic activity, changes in gas emissions and surface deformation. Currently, all these indicators are within normal limits. Nevertheless, some scientists suggest that we should wait for the next eruption. Why? Because the probability of an eruption after a dormant period increases over time. Yellowstone has been quiet for about 70,000 years, which is longer than its previous dormant periods. This means that there is a high probability that it could erupt in the near future. In addition, the so-called magma budget approach is used to estimate the likelihood of an eruption. This method involves measuring the amount of magma generated inside the Earth and comparing that amount to the amount that has been removed from the magma chamber during eruptions. The difference between these two values gives us the total amount of magma that has accumulated in the chamber since the last eruption. At Yellowstone, the magma budget approach suggests that the magma chamber has filled up enough for an eruption. According to some scientists, this may happen within the next 20,000 years. Others believe that it could happen much sooner. So far, there have been no significant changes in seismic activity or other signs indicating that an eruption is imminent. However, it's worth noting that the magma chamber is constantly being replenished, meaning that there is always a chance that an eruption could occur. This is supported by recent studies which show that magma is rising rapidly beneath Yellowstone. Some researchers say that it's happening faster than expected. According to Michael Poland, director of the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, The rate of magma supply has accelerated significantly in the last decade. If an eruption occurs, it will most likely be explosive. However, experts assure us that we are still far from this point. But what happens if they're wrong? How dangerous would an eruption of the Yellowstone Super Volcano really be? It is estimated that the next eruption of the Yellowstone Super Volcano will eject about 1,000 cubic kilometers of material. An eruption of this magnitude would have a devastating impact on the surrounding area. People living nearby would have to face pyroclastic flows, falling volcanic bombs and a thick layer of ash. Such events are typical for powerful eruptions. However, a large eruption of the Yellowstone Super Volcano would pose no threat to people beyond the immediate vicinity. Pyroclastic flows and falling volcanic bombs would most likely remain confined to the Yellowstone National Park area. Ash would cover a larger area, but its thickness would decrease with distance. However, an eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano would affect more than just the surrounding area. It would affect the entire planet. But how exactly? Volcanic ash can travel thousands of kilometers in the atmosphere. Some of it would eventually make its way into the stratosphere and reflect sunlight back into space. This would lead to global cooling and disruption of weather patterns. Global climate models suggest that an eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano would cause an average temperature drop of about 1 degree Celsius. In addition, sulfur dioxide gas released during the eruption would react with water vapor in the atmosphere to form sulfuric acid aerosols. These aerosols would also contribute to global cooling and could stay in the atmosphere for several years. Some studies suggest that an eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano could trigger a so-called volcanic winter, a period of abnormally low temperatures that could last for several years. However, it is unclear whether such consequences will really occur because the climate system is extremely complex and includes numerous feedback mechanisms. There are different opinions on this matter. For example, some researchers argue that the effects of an eruption on the climate would be negligible. Others claim that the global temperature would drop by as much as 10 degrees Celsius. What's certain is that an eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano would have profound implications for agriculture and the economy. Crop yields would decline due to cold weather and ash covering farmlands. Global economic output would also decline as trade and transportation routes are disrupted. The full extent of the impacts of an eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano remains uncertain. Scientists continue to debate the issue. Let's get back to the earthquake that occurred on January 4, 2022. Can we expect it to trigger a volcanic eruption? Earthquakes are quite common in the Yellowstone region and are usually harmless. However, they can sometimes cause volcanic eruptions. That's because earthquakes can change the pressure balance within a magma chamber. This can cause magma to rise from deep underground and trigger an eruption. In the case of the Yellowstone supervolcano, however, there is no reason to worry. Earthquakes of magnitude 8 or higher occur in the region every 5 to 10 years. They don't seem to affect the volcano's activity. There is no evidence that the recent earthquake will trigger an eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano. Experts believe that it was a random event that was not related to volcanic activity. The earthquake did not cause any significant changes in the behavior of the volcano, such as an increase in gas emissions or surface deformation, so the recent earthquake is unlikely to trigger an eruption. At present, there is no scientific basis for assuming that an eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano is imminent. Volcanic eruptions are usually preceded by increased seismic activity, changes in gas emissions, and surface deformation. Currently, all these indicators are within normal limits. However, this does not mean that an eruption is impossible. As mentioned earlier, the magma chamber is constantly being replenished, meaning that there is always a chance that an eruption could occur. Experts assure us that we are still far from the next eruption. However, no one can say for sure when it will happen. Therefore, scientists continue to closely monitor the Yellowstone supervolcano. The next eruption will surely come, but we still have time to prepare for it. Maybe in a few hundred or even a few thousand years, but definitely not in 2025, as some media outlets have sensationalized. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up. Also check out other videos on our channel that we think you might enjoy. Thanks for watching.